What is up, everyone? This is DragonBallMedia, and today I thought it'd be fun to do a tier list of all of the characters within the Tournament of Power in the Dragon Ball Super series. What's fun about these lists is it's going to be 100% my opinion, so no outsider persuasion or anything like that. And this is strictly going to be within the Tournament of Power as well, so we're not going to rank a character based on the other series or anything like that. We're also acting as if every universe had to start over and could pick any fighter from any universe, sort of like an NFL or NBA draft, if you will. This is going to be based on their involvement, how well they did in team fights, their powers and abilities, and overall just how good they fit on a team if I were to choose to be in the tournament. These are ranked from S tier all the way to D tier, so let's go through the ranks real fast just to clarify what exactly they mean. S tier is, the league of their own. These characters are, well, it pretty much sums it up right there, just in a league of their own. They're way overpowered with the fights they were chosen in, or their abilities are just way too good and, would get chosen first if you were to choose your own team. A tier list is God level. Now, no, this doesn't mean they're on the same level as Gods of Destruction, but out of all the characters that were in the Tournament of Power, these are the ones that are essentially overpowered most, if not everyone else. These fighters would more than likely get picked first or second when picking for a team. We have B tier, which is, above average. These fighters are essentially the ones that can be average or trash fighters, but can't really stand a 1v1 against God or, a league of their own fighters. Also, their abilities are pretty good in team fights, and they're just overall good team-based fighters. C tier, which is average, these are the fighters that are just, there to defeat no-name characters, or, they're no-name characters that are just there to get defeated or showcased by other fighters. You'd only pick these characters if you are down to your last maybe 2 to 3 picks, and you just need somebody to pick. These fighters are not really going to make or break your team, but these more or less just front and assembly characters. And D tier list, which is trash. These are the fighters that are literally just terrible. They were written in specifically just to be a number count for other fighters. They have no real amazing abilities, they aren't really good in team fights, and you usually never pick these characters unless you're forced to. So those are the tier lists. I'm not for sure how long this video will be, so I hope you guys stick around to the very end and that you can create your own and send them to me to see how close our opinions are. A lot of these I will be giving my opinions on why I put them in the specific tier boxes, so without further ado, let's begin. Starting off is Android 17, and I'm not even going to hesitate, he's on a God level tier for sure. I mean, do I even really have to explain why 17 is on this tier list? Not only was he the most surprising fighter throughout the tournament, but he was, one of the last ones remaining. Well, he was the last one remaining. He helped defeat Universe 2, 3, and 4, not to mention he's the first to actually hurt Jiren. And he tied for the most, actually he tied for the second most eliminations with 8. I think that was with Vegeta. I mean, come on, the dude would easily be a first, if not an easy second or third pick. Goku, I'm also going to have to put in the A tier. I know this is going to surprise a lot of you, but he's really not that good of a teammate. Sort of likes to do his own thing and gets himself into tricky situations at times, and if the universe was at stake, Goku would still be an easy second choice. I mean, sure, he's got Mastered Ultra Instinct, but he took way too much damage before reaching that, and he needed energy from Vegeta in order to continue. He can pretty much stand toe-to-toe with everyone within the tournament, but I really can't really say that he's on a league of his own yet. Next, we have Vegeta, who, also is going to be an A-tier list, God level selection. I'm not going to explain too much. He's essentially in the same boat as Goku. Doesn't really like team fighting, so that's kind of a downside. And he gets beat by other fighters at times. But he's definitely better than most other fighters, especially most other, above average fighters. Negrassi is up, and I don't know who ordered this or who put this together, but that's kind of out of placement. I thought we were going in, each universe, but whatever. Anyways, I'm going to have to easily put him in the trash tier. He's not really useful for anything. He doesn't defeat anyone, nor does he do any damage to anyone whatsoever. He doesn't even have good abilities, so that wouldn't help in team fights. I guess the only positive thing I could say about him is that in the manga, he does take a hit from Jiren and somehow stays conscious. He also fuses together to form Agnilisa, but he needs other fighters from Universe 3 to do that, so yeah, he's just pretty much worthless. Next is Gohan, going back to Universe 7, and this is going to be a really challenging one. Even though he's not as strong as Jiren or Goku, he's really smart and does one of the most brilliant things within the tournament and sacrifices himself to take out Dispo. He also does good against Omni, Jamaze, and Purina. Gonna botch these names terribly, by the way. I'm just going to play it safe and throw him in the above average tier list just because he wouldn't be a second or third pick or even a fifth maybe. But out of all the characters in the tournament, he has some of the best teamwork capabilities and his power is really good. He doesn't really have the momentum or crazy abilities that would last deep within the tournament, but nonetheless, he's definitely one of the best above average fighters so far, which, really isn't saying much. We don't have any more. Piccolo, oh boy, I'm going to have to put him in the average average spot just because, I mean, what does he really do? He has senses that can detect invisible enemies, and that's sort of, it. He defeats a couple of no-name characters, but I feel like they wrote him in just to, make it seem like he's not entirely worthless. Then he gets taken out by Damon, who was, invisible. His power level is just average, but I feel like if he was able to use his special beam cannon against really anyone, he could do some serious damage. Unfortunately, he's definitely going to be one of those characters that gets picked last on a team, so it's, it is what it is. I'm sorry, Piccolo. Frieza, easy god tier pick. I mean, he's not as strong as Jiren, top, or, even 17, but he's definitely a character that can go toe-to-toe against pretty much anyone else. And for being one of the most evil villains throughout the series, he has some of the best teamwork throughout the tournament. So he'd be a solid top 5 or 6 pick, I would assume. His power and teamwork is key. Up next is Roshi, and he's going to be right there with Piccolo, but leaning towards the, the trash tier. I mean, he gets a massive power up before the tournament and showcases a little bit of it within the tournament itself, but he doesn't really do much of anything else. Definitely a good team player, that's why he's not in the trash tier list. But he definitely doesn't have much capability of taking out other above average fighters. He's one of those fighters that you're definitely going to see picked at the very end, maybe at your 10th pick spot, who knows. Our boy Krillin, no surprise, definitely a trash tier. He's only really in the tournament just to fill spots. Besides the Destructo Disc and Final Flash, Krillin doesn't really offer much of anything to the table. Sure, he'd be a good team player, but with his moveset and power, it's really not saying much. He's not going to be able to take on above average fighters or just average fighters in general, and overall he's just going to be one of the last landing spots on the team. Tien, definitely an easy average spot. He's higher than Piccolo and Roshi, but in terms of strength alone, I just don't see him being a Gohan. However, he is very useful in team fights and even has his multiple form technique that helps him eliminate Hermilla, so that ability alone with his Neo Tri-Beam are definitely very useful. Overall, good teamwork pick, but very weak when it comes to matching up against other fighters. Android 18, a solid above average tier for her. I love that she has a mentality just like the Saiyans and that she wants to be one of the strongest and she absolutely hates defeat. She also takes out Ribrian, who was a very strong fighter, so all in all, can comfortably say 18 is definitely an above average pick. She's very strong, she hates defeat, and she has a pretty good strong moveset. Kakunza, I think that's how you pronounce her name, and she's from Ribrian's universe, which is 2. What's crazy about her is she's different between the anime and manga, and in the manga, she's able to hold her own against, for a little bit against 17 and 18, so her power level is pretty good. She doesn't do anything really crazy, so I'm going to have to put her in the average tier list. She's not trash, but she's also really not the most useful fighter, and for her team set abilities, I couldn't see her really being picked, or even wanting to be picked, to be honest. Same with Rosie, she's also going to be an average tier. I would actually put her above Kakunza, just because she seems to have more power. Not to mention in the manga, she's able to hold her own against both androids and base form Goku. Not to mention she has really good team attacks, but, she has to be with other 2 fighters, so it's a hit or miss. But overall, I think she's a good average fighter. Ribrian, however, definitely an above average fighter. Her fights with 17 and Vegeta prove she could stand toe-to-toe with some of the more powerful fighters within the tournament. Not to mention she could transform into a giant form that has even more power. Definitely a solid 5 or 6 pick depending on what spot you get her in. She also does very well with teaming, so that's, another good team-based pick. Next is Sarbuto, who is also a Universe 2 fighter. He's actually pretty worthless and will go down in the D tier list. Literally isn't helpful at all unless he's got his other Universe 2 team members with him. Arguably one of the worst fighters throughout the whole tournament. On to Robanra, and I guess this list is going to be go on universal order now, which is going to make things a lot easier because remembering these fighters and what they do is really hard when, everything's scattered around. But anyways, he'll go in the average section. He's not really good, nor is he terrible. I know he survived a legendary Super Saiyan attack from Kale, so it's going, that's got to say something, I guess. Once again, really only good when paired with his other Kamikaze Fireball teammates. Doesn't really have insane abilities that would be good in team fights, so yeah, I'm just going to have to stick him in the average tier list. Up next is Jamuza, and once again, we run into another fighter who is different from the manga and anime, and it's kind of unfortunate they do that, but whatever. In the manga, he's actually completely worthless and gets knocked out fairly quickly, but in the anime, he's able to match up against base Gohan and even has an instant transmission technique, which could be useful. He was also able to knock out the meditating fighter Zorkor, which really isn't saying much at all. I'll also put him in the average tier because he's not necessarily good at all, but he's not trash either, I guess. Definitely wouldn't see him picked anytime soon if you were to kind of draft this. Next, we have Bakal, and no doubt definitely going in the trash tier list. Absolutely worthless character. Doesn't do anything. Pretty much was written in the script specifically to make other fighters look good when eliminating her. She's arguably one of the worst in the universe, too, and could even be the worst out of that whole tournament, to be honest. Now we have the big man himself from Universe 2, Zerloin, and this is going to come to a surprise, but he's going to be in the trash tier, and I'll explain. Even though he's, unintimidated by all the transformations, he really didn't do anything, and only became a threat when he absorbed Ribrian's power. Overall, pretty worthless character, nothing special about him, and like I said, if he doesn't have Ribrian there, what use would he actually be? I'm not for real sure if he can absorb other fighters, teammates, and kind of take on there, but we only really seen him absorb his teammate Ribrian, so yeah, just overall Zornlane, he kind of sucks. Next, we got another big man, Broom. And this is a pretty fun character, definitely going in the average tier list. In the anime, he's actually pretty weak, and his only usefulness is for reflecting attacks, which is good in team fights for sure. He was even able to hold out on one of Vegeta's Gallic Gun attacks, but in the manga, he fights a little bit, but he isn't really too strong. Ultimately, he'd only be useful in defensive team fights, which is actually pretty good if you want to choose him for that. Not to mention, he has these drone-like things that come out from his body, and I'm pretty sure they can spy on other fighters, which I don't know why you'd want to do that, but regardless, pretty interesting move. Hermilla! This is another very limited but interesting fighter. He'll have to go in the average tier as well. He's got this sniper shot ability that wrecks fighters like Tien and Piccolo. They're incredibly powerful, but it seems like they're only really good against other average fighters. Definitely good average fighter, going to be towards the top of that list, but, pretty weak as well at the same time. And that looks like the end of Universe 2. Pretty worthless universe in all honesty, and one of the worst stacked of fighters. Not really too special about them, and they're all pretty much terrible. Now it looks like we're going back to Universe 3 fighters, and this is one of my favorite universes for sure. Starting it off is Zabricio, who was a really cool character as far as design goes, but unfortunately he's extremely trash and gets eliminated by, I think, Roshi. Not a good fighter whatsoever. Next we have Narirama, who is arguably one of my favorite fighters from this universe. He was designed specifically to last a long time, but unfortunately Hit and Basil took him out with ease. I'm going to have to put him in the average tier list just because his attack set is really cool and could be effective, but he was taken out by top tier fighters, so I can't really hate on him or his power too much. Next we have Maji Keo, and I think that's how you say it. Easily a B or above tier fighter. I absolutely love this fighter, to be honest. He's more of a helper rather than a 1v1 fighter. His trickery is just superb. He's able to modify his body and overdo Super Saiyan Goku, which is a huge accomplishment. He also tricks fighters like Dispo, and honestly, I'd really like to put this fighter in the God tier list, but when a Saiyan turns into a God state, or, if he's attacked by Jiren, which he was, he's easily defeated. Overall, very good fighter, one of the best above average fighters within this list so far. Once again, not really saying too much, but towards the end, I still think he would be up there in the lists. On to the next Universe 3 fighter, it's Katapasara. I think I said that right. Once again, a fighter who is different compared to his anime and manga form. In the manga, he fought Nink for a little bit before he was taken out by Vegeta. Within the anime, though, he's able to do a little bit of damage to Vegeta, although it's close to nothing. I'm putting him in the average tier, and I gotta say, he's the best average fighter thus far. I mean, the fact that this dude has an ultimate form and goes after Jiren and Vegeta of all people, he just don't care, and it's overly confident within his powers. So, it's gotta say something, even though he did virtually nothing to those fighters. Next, we have this little robot named Bororita, who is also going to be an average tier list. He's not really the best amongst this universe, but he's able to go up against Goku and Ultimate Gohan, which is real sediment to his power. He's eventually taken out by the Saiyan, but overall, he's just not bad character, but it's pretty much mostly useful if he's with his other robot companions. On to another small robot, Katu Sakai. He's also an average fighter, nothing insanely special about him. He was able to match against Kaba in a 1v1, and this little robot right here was even prepared to fight Jiren by himself. Pretty stupid of him, but you have to honor the golden spirit of him. Pepperoni. Oh yes, everyone remembers this purple pimp-looking character from the tournament. He's going to be in the average tier list. He's not terrible. He's able to match Rabanra and Zerloin, so that's something, I guess. This dude isn't really anything special, but not terrible, I'm pretty sure. He's also the creator of the robots, if I'm not mistaken. He doesn't have insane movesets or abilities that would be good in team fights, but he's also not trash, so take that as you will. Next is Biara, and one of the reasons I can remember this robot is because he's one of the few that have such big nipples. I don't know why I picked up on that, but I did. I know this might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm going to have to put him in the B tier list, and I'll explain why. He literally took on 17 and 18 at the same time. He has this ability where he has insanely strong armor, so if it wasn't for not knowing 17 and 18 would not tire out, he probably would have withstood them a little bit longer than he did. His strength and his armor would be so good in team fights, so he's got to be, above all of the average fighters for sure. And if you're going to pick somebody who has really defensive structure and somewhat good attacks and, just overall just a giant defensive rock, I guess, if you will, then he would probably be one of the best. Pansia, the other robot with nipples. I'm going to put him surprisingly in the trash tier just because he does absolutely nothing when solo. He's only really effective when teamed with his fellow robot teammates, so yeah, if he wasn't picked with them, then he'd be pretty much worthless. Definitely one of the worst fighters from Universe 3, and it seems we're done with Universe 3 from the looks of it. Overall, pretty good universe, could have done better, but overall can't really complain. Most of the fighters ended up average or above average, so that's pretty good. Now on to Universe 4's team, and this universe has a really good and really bad fighters. Starting it off is Damon, and a little green bug that can turn invisible. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky because his attacks can also be confused with the other invisible fighter, Gamisaros, but Damon lasted longer, so I'll just assume he was the one that did most of the damage. So I'm going to put him in the above average just because he can turn invisible, and within the manga, he literally was the one that did or partook in defeating the Kamikaze Fireballs, including Ribrian, and also took out Android 18 and Piccolo. Still debatable on who was the one that took them out, but Damon seems stronger and quicker, so I'm just going to assume it was him. Very good strategic fighter to have on a team, especially because he's, he can turn invisible. So yeah, and he can destroy pretty much all average fighters, I would assume, just because of his power level and the fact that he took out Piccolo with pretty much ease. Up next is Ganos, and this is a very interesting one. Within the manga, him and Roshi stand toe-to-toe, and Roshi even states that Ganos possesses a threat against Goku and, others like that because of his ability to become stronger and quicker as the fight goes on. It then took the strongest Kamehameha Roshi has ever used to defeat him, so that kind of says a little bit. So in essence, I'm going to have to keep him in the average tier list just because, he still was eliminated by Roshi of all people, so he probably wouldn't pose that much of a threat against the other above average fighters, but he's definitely not trash tier material. On to Kawaii, and I'm not going to waste any time with this, and easily a trash tier and arguably the worst fighter throughout the whole series. Literally eliminated herself when she was fighting base Roshi. Absolutely terrible fighter. Dekuri, once again another trash tier fighter, getting overwhelmed by base Roshi, does absolutely nothing within the fight and doesn't have any moves that would be good for team fighting. I don't see anyone ever picking this character, but in the manga she's able to stand against base Kale, but easily gets overthrown out of the ring by her, so yeah, another really terrible fighter. We need to get out of this slump, ladies and gentlemen, and can Universe 4's fighter Shosa do this for us? Unfortunately not. Absolutely not. Another trash tier fighter. The only thing this character is useful for is playing dead, which is, also absolutely terrible. He gets outmatched by 18, just, overall not a good character, doesn't have any moves that would be good in team fights. Wow, Universe 4 is really not looking good at all. Mona! This is a pretty decent character. She has the ability to grow and overpower Super Saiyan Kaba, so that says a little bit. So she'll go in the average tier list. I don't see this character beating anyone above average, but she does stand a good chance against most of the fighters within the average tier list. Up next is Nink. Now this is going to be come to a surprise, but I'm going to have to put him in the trash tier list. You may remember at the beginning of the tournament where he pretty much overpowers and almost sacrifices himself to take out a god tier fighter, that being Goku. But Goku was in his base form and he was able to easily subdue him with a bear hug. So honestly, I barely see this character standing up against Krillin in a fight. So yeah, Nink, I don't think is that overwhelming of a character, especially considering he has really no special moves that would be good in a team fight. Yeah. Next is Majora, which is a pretty interesting character considering he's blind. Unfortunately, he couldn't even 1v1 Krillin, so instantly you get in the trash tier for that. He's got incredibly good smell skills, but I mean, if he can't even take on Krillin, who would he beat? Not to mention the dude is blind, so really he has a huge disadvantage. I think this would obviously be Gamisaros, who is the invisible character, who, just like Damon. And to be fair, I'm going to put him in the average tier list because, you really never know who does all the attacking between him and Damon, but he's taken out first, so I'm going to assume he's the weaker one out of the bunch, but an average tier list is fair. Xingqiu, the blue little character from Universe 4. Absolutely terrible fighter, going in the trash tier list as well. Not only does this dude replicate himself in hides, but then he easily gets taken out by Piccolo. What more do I really need to say? So that was Universe 4, which, what an incredibly terrible universe with most of the fighters ending up in the trash tier list. Now on to some pretty exciting universes, that being Universe 6. Otamo, the big yellow bear fighter. He's primarily useful for, being a defensive fighter, which is pretty good, and would definitely be good in team fights. Not only that, but he's able to stand up against Super Saiyan Vegeta and Gohan and most of the other Z fighters. His power is decent, but it's his defense that he'd be useful for, so I'm going to put in the I think the average section. I think that's fair. Up next is Frost, and which is pretty much the Universe 6 counterpart to Frieza. Even though his power level is nowhere near Frieza's, he's still an incredibly strong fighter. He's able to take out Krillin, Roshi, Tien, and Super Saiyan Goku, or not take out, but pretty much, do damage to him. He really doesn't have any incredible powers other than his strength, but he's able to withstand Tien's full power tri-beam with it doing nothing to him. So I'm going to have to list him in the above average, but he would be towards the bottom of the list, but still can overpower most if not all the other average fighters. On to Vegeta. He's easily an above average fighter. He's known for his incredible defensive and insanely good offense. He's able to take punches from Top and Super Saiyan Vegeta, and even survived a blast from legendary Super Saiyan Kale. So that's gotta attribute to something. His team fights would be incredibly useful since he's able to increase the temperature and take most of his hits from pretty much any fighter. Overall, very good defensive fighter and really good pick if you're going for team fight capabilities. Cabba, definitely above average fighter. I don't really need to explain him. He has incredible strength. He's a Saiyan. He's like Gohan in the sense he's actually really smart and would be good in team fights. Overall, good pick for a team-based pick. Hit, insanely good character and our first god tier in a while. Once again, I don't really need to explain this one. Very strong, insane speed, was able to take out Dispo and land a hit on Jiren of all people. He can defeat most, if not all, the other fighters, not including the Jiren. So, yeah, definitely one of your 2 or 3 picks. Most definitely the best. In my opinion, I would say the best god tier list character we have so far. So, yeah, and that's saying something. So Nell, which is Universe 6's Namekian. So he's going to be, he's got most of the same abilities as Piccolo. I'm going to just rank him and Pilana at the same time just because they do virtually the same thing. And they even team and fight the same fights. They're both average fighters, but are immensely strong. They don't have crazy powers, but their strength alone was able to match Gohan and Piccolo, so I can easily say that they're very average. Up next is the Pig Doctor, Dr. Rota. So it's unfortunate because apparently he has magical powers, but is never really able to use them, which kind of sucks, so I can't really base anything on that. He's able to match Proom, who is an average fighter, but I'm going to have to list him in the trash tier just because he doesn't do anything special and is knocked out really fairly easily. Caulifla, very good character. I noticed they forgot Kale, I think. I don't see her anywhere, which is unfortunate. Oh well. Caulifla, I don't really have to explain. Definitely an above average fighter. I honestly, I would have put her in the god tier list, but most of her fights in the tournament were with the enraged Kale. So honestly, I don't know what she'd be able to do against other god tier fighters. I know she stood toe to toe against Goku, but Kale, was also a part of that. So who really knows? I feel confident in putting her in the above tier list fighters, and she would actually be picked sort of towards the top of that list. So yeah, that's saying something. And that was Universe 6. Very good universe. Easily a top 3, just on a few of their fighters alone. Now on to the Universe 9, starting with the trio of danger fighters, Basil. Now this is a hard one because in my opinion, he could beat any average fighter on this list, but when fighting above average fighters or god tier fighters, he's with his brothers. He easily gets taken out by he easily takes out Narirama's arms and trades punches with Top, but I just can't see him beating any of the above average fighters. I'm going to have to put him in the average tier list, but he'd officially be the strongest of this list at the moment, in my opinion. Lavender, this character alone would be so effective in team fights just because of his poison that eventually weakens any fighter until they can't compete anymore. I know this is going to be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm going to put him in the above average tier list. For one, he's able to match Gohan in their fight, and in team fights, if he's successfully able to land his poison on above average fighters or god tiers, it could do some insane, serious damage. Gohan and Goku were able to train against this thing come the tournament, but if they hadn't, they'd be screwed. He's not as strong as his brothers, but his strength and abilities would be such a good pick for team fights, so that's why he lands in the above average list. Next is Bergamo, and this is going to be another pick where I put them in the same place due solely because of their abilities. So yes, Bergamo is insanely strong, but his ability to grow into a giant form of himself while absorbing damage, I mean, really, that's an insane ability. This alone could help him take out a chunk of fighters just because he can grow larger than the ring itself if he wanted to. I think his abilities alone are enough to put him in the above average tier list and would be a very good team-based pick. Rosalie, absolutely a terrible fighter. Definitely going in the trash tier, doesn't have any abilities that are worth mentioning, gets destroyed easily by Frieza in the anime, and in the manga, he 1v1s Piccolo, but overall just doesn't have any movesets that are worth the pick. Not the worst fighter, but definitely nowhere close to the average. Oregano, known for his spiderweb attack things. Yeah, another terrible character. easily outmatched. I don't think he could 1v1 most, if not any, average fighter. His web does subdue base Vegeta for a short period of time, but his strength doesn't make up for that, so yeah, definitely a trash tier. Hisopp, definitely one of the best average fighters so far. He overpowers Piccolo and even matches base form Frost. He has this ability where he can freeze opponents, which wouldn't be good in team-based fights. He's actually very powerful as well, so if you're going to pick an average fighter, he'd definitely be one of the first choices, if not the second picked, just on team fighting techniques alone. Chapel, which is this lizard-like character, unfortunately I'm going to have to list him in the trash tier as well. Has no real good abilities. He's able to match base Goku and Gohan within the anime and manga, but doesn't really do any damage to either one of them. He has this fire ability that creates like massive fireball blasts, but that doesn't seem to do really much of anything. I'll easily say that he's one of the best trash tier fighters though, so take that as you will. Sorel, which is a rabbit-like fighter, easily a trash tier, not even going to question this. Doesn't do anything in the tournament, really has no abilities whatsoever. Yeah, I can easily say one of the worst within the tournament, not even just within her universe, but just overall worst in the whole tournament. Now we have Hop. Once again, we go into the trash tier. She has long claws that can scratch and attack enemies, but I mean, you know, she gets taken out easily by base Vegeta. Extremely terrible fighter with no team-based abilities. Next is Comfrey, who is this lizard-like character, I think. Within the anime, he's easily taken out by Vegeta by a Ki Blast. But in the manga, he's able to match Omni, who's an incredibly strong fighter, and Frost even. So overall, his strength is pretty good. He doesn't have any insane fighting abilities, so putting him in the average spot would be fair. He's just really towards the bottom, if anything. Now on to Universe 10, which is probably the worst universe in terms of characters they have, although they have one of my favorite fighters throughout the entire tournament. But we're starting off our list with Murachim. Overall, this character is pretty worthless in both the anime and manga. In the manga, however, he does have this barrier-like ability that can prevent attackers, but his strength and lack of other abilities just, is atrocious, so he's going in the trash tier list. Rylablu. Now, this is going to be one of the few fighters that can actually fly from an ability, so if you wanted technique or strategy, you could have her just, fly at the top and just hide, but ultimately she would probably get shot down by something. Other than that, she's pretty terrible and gets easily taken out by Basal, so she'd go into the trash tier list as well. We need to stop this trash tier streak, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to get really bad, or this is getting really bad. Dirasim, which is I'm pretty sure that's how you say his name, and I'm pretty sure he also has a different name in the manga, but whatever, we're gonna go with Dirasim. So this character is extremely weak and gets easily taken out by Piccolo of all fighters. He doesn't really seem to have any sort of ability that would help him in team fights, so yeah, once again, trash tier material. Murasim, not gonna waste any time, absolutely terrible fighter, and easily gets taken out by base form Kaba. Has no real abilities whatsoever, just written in to get taken out, which is a shame. This universe really is not looking good so far. Mathiop, which is this boxer type fighter. He's really one of the only fighters within the universe that has different abilities. He can stretch his arm to a pretty long length, so that can be used in team fights. But the downside is he gets eliminated by Gohan because of this, so overall pretty terrible fighter, once again going in the trash tier. Now we move on to a good fighter, the sumo type fighter himself, Nappa. And actually he's really not that good whatsoever. He was able to stand up against Super Saiyan Caulifla for a brief moment, but that ended horribly. He's more of a defensive pick, but really because of the other fighters that have Ki Blasts and can shoot from a far distance, this fighter really is supposed to be worthless. And if I'm not mistaken, in the manga he gets defeated by Piccolo with ease, so yeah, definitely a terrible fighter, and he's going to end up in the trash tier as well. Rubalt. So in terms of power, he's seen to be a lot weaker than Piccolo, seeing how he's easily taken out by the Namekian. This character really is shown to have no abilities or moveset whatsoever, so yeah, trash tier list. Once again. Zerkor, who's this meditating-like fighter. Honestly, I thought this dude was going to be pretty cool and have interesting abilities, but he gets eliminated by Jamizu of all people, and he's in the average tier list. Can't really say much about him considering he doesn't have any special abilities, so he's in the trash list too. Now I can finally say we're going to break the trash tier list chain with one of my favorite fighters within the tournament, Omni. He's easily an above average fighter, and I could say that with full confidence, he can take out any fighter below him. He's got one of my favorite abilities, that with team fights, he can easily take out or win against other above average fighters, and potentially even a god tier fighter. With the ability to control his ki and pretty much a fighter fighting Omni must take a hit before even coming in contact with him, so automatically you're going to get hit no matter what. Not to mention he's insanely fast, being able to punch potential unleash Gohan several times before Gohan caught up. Easily one of the best fighters in the tournament, and honestly I would say that if he's given a good team around him, Omni could overpower all of the other above average fighters easily. Next is the bird character Diam. He is also one of the few fighters that has built-in fly technique, but unfortunately his strength abilities are just weak from anyone that would want to pick him. He has fire type abilities, but they seem to do next to nothing, so unfortunately back to the trash tier list we go. And that was it for Universe 10, literally the worst group of fighters within the tournament, but had a diamond in the rough with Omni, so he was arguably one of the best fighters within the tournament. Now on to our last universe, that being Universe 11, and starting it off is Jiren, who's literally the reason there's a League of Their Own tier list. I don't even have to explain this. Jiren's the strongest, best fighter in the entire tournament. Really, if he had just teamed more with his other companions, they would have won the tournament easily. That's the only downside to Jiren. Other than that, completely overpowered and can beat anyone within a 1v1. Next is Top, who is easily the second best fighter in Universe 11's already stacked team. His strength is able to match or outmatch Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta, Android 17, Potential Unleashed Gohan. He's got all these abilities, including the masterization of using Godly Ki. He's more of a physical up-close fighter, so most of his attacks are coming from his fists and kicks. He's easily a god tier, and in all honesty, he's probably the best 1v1 fighter in the tournament, not mentioning Jiren. And also, not to mention, he's not senseless, so he's a good team player. Honestly, would be a first choice if you had to choose a god tier list fighter for your team, so I can honestly say I would probably pick him over Goku. Dispo, insanely good pick for team fights. Because of his insane speed and strength, he would be one of the best team fight picks in the entire tournament. I mean, even Zeno and Champa couldn't even keep up with some of the moves he was using. His strength really is nothing to be messed with either, as he's able to match Super Saiyan God Goku and Golden Frieza and hit. So yeah, he's easily a god tier fighter. Vuan, this is an interesting decision because this guy really isn't good, but he's not bad either. He's got this ability called Justice Whip, which is like this electrical energy wave that can wrap around other fighters and essentially hold them there. But he doesn't really showcase really an insane strength. I think an average tier would fit him best just because of that Justice Whip move alone, which could be useful in team fights, I reckon. But it seems as though it would only be really effective against some above average fighters and average fighters in general. Kinesis, he's got one of the most useful techniques in the entire tournament. It's these like long energy like threads that can grab people, or I guess, you know, he can grab teammates too. So if someone is about to get eliminated, he could easily use those to retrieve his fellow fighters. This alone is a really good trait in team fights, I reckon. His strength is pretty good as well, as he was able to take hits from Super Saiyan Blue Goku, so that says a lot. He was beaten by Hit, but I mean, it's Hit of all people. So I'm going to put Kinesis in the above average tier list, just because he'd be really good in team fights, and he could be really useful with his abilities and strength. Up next is Tupper, who has a really either beneficial ability or lackluster, depending on how you look at it. He can essentially control his weight, so either he can gain or lose weight fairly quickly. So if he wanted to, he could act like a giant rock, just sitting there and taking hits, ensuring that he stays in the tournament longer. He also has this. He also is able to take on Omni, so that easily lands him in the above average tier list. Certainly not the worst from Universe 11, but definitely not the best. Zor, he's a really good team fighter, but unfortunately he seems like he's pretty lackluster in 1v1s. He does have a pretty good strength that I think could outmatch most, if not all, the other average fighters. In the manga, he was able to fly, so he's easily the best within the tournament that has a flying technique. With that said though, I think he's still just an average tier list fighter, just because most of his abilities have to be formed with some other Pride Troopers. So if he gets chosen on a team without them, who knows how effective he'd be really. Now on to Kakuti. I won't even waste time here, easily an above average team fighter. I would have put her in a god tier if her strength was a little bit better, but one of the reasons she's so great and would be excellent in team fighting pick, is her dome ability. This can trap any fighter inside or even a group of fighters. It's so strong that Goku and Android 17 couldn't break it, even though while doing this leaves her open to getting attacked. Kakuti surrounded by a good team would be so useful. Next is Kettle, who is another fighter that has such a good ability that it lands him in the above average tier list. He's able to create all of these energy balls around him that does serious damage, and he can create an insane amount of them too. Most of his strength lies within grouping with his other Pride Troopers, but his fight with Caulifla really signaled a lot about this fighter and his strength. Definitely a really good fighter for team fight. And last on our list is Keserol. I think I said that right. Who is Universe 11's general. I wish we ended on a more interesting character, but it is what it is. He's easily an average pick, which may surprise a lot of you, but I mean, the guy is easily stopped by Android 17. Most of his spotlight also comes in the formation of his abilities with other Pride Troopers, so he may not be as good without them. He doesn't have an insane single abilities, but he does have this powerful cannon-like energy wave attack he can shoot, so I'm pretty sure he can 1v1 all of the average fighters and below on this list. And that's it for today's tier list video, guys. If you enjoyed, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what tier list you would enjoy next. Be sure to follow me on Instagram. I post there daily, and I do stories and games and stuff like that, and that would be instagram.com/DragonBallMedia. Other than that, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you stuck around to the very end, and yeah, this is DragonBall Media, and I will see you guys in the next video.